like I know when I've made a killer demo, and but in order to do that, I have to make 1,000 terrible ones. But I always know, I always know when that one killer one is killer, and I know that if that person doesn't believe in it, somebody else is going to believe in it.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about.
Hey, it's Larry Flick. Welcome to another edition of Let's Talk Music. This is the real-life, real-time version of what we do each and every day on the VERO platform. We talk music. We share our favorite songs, our favorite artists, our life experiences, our memories, our emotions connected to the thing we all have in common, music. Now, for this episode, we're going to talk about that thing, that intangible element that brings a great recording together. Chemistry, collaboration, those things that are the foundation of every great recording. And we have got two really interesting young emerging artists to talk about how they're finding their journey toward coming up with the greatest equation of their sound. We're going to be talking to a young woman from Nashville. Her name is Emily Rose, and she has been doing quite well as an independent artist, having gotten over 200,000 spins on Spotify for her self-made release, The Heart. Great EP, plus tons of other great independent singles. She's working on a brand new record. And Evenson is going to join us to talk about how he has honed one of the most unique sounds I've heard in a really long time. We're talking pop that is accessible, but experimental. And he's got a lot to say on this topic. Of course, I'm also joined, as always, by my co-pilot in all things Let's Talk Music, Pete Winfield of Until the Ribbon Breaks. Now he, as we're building this program today, he is in the middle of building a record that is designed around chemistry and collaboration. So we're going to have to hear a lot about his record and how it's coming along. And speaking of Pete, let's bring him on because it's time for our VERO Recommends question. What is your favorite collaboration or feature? Take it away, Pete.
Okay, so a low pressure start to the questions is one example of your favorite collaboration or feature. And, let's go, Emily.
Okay, Robert Plant and Alison Krauss in the Raising Sand album. It's my favorite.
Any particular, I know it's hard to say why with music,
right?
Any reason why?
Well, sonically, it just like sounded so good, and I just loved seeing two completely different worlds collide, and it just felt so right. You know what I mean? Like it didn't feel forced or anything. It was just perfect. I loved it.
Yeah, those records are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Love it. And Evenson.
I would say honestly, when I heard of this question, the first thing that came to mind was Paul McCartney and Kanye West when they were working on 4 or 5 Seconds, Only One, and also All Day. Right. I remember when I was looking at a YouTube video. This is like years back. But it's interesting because Kanye is so like egoful. I don't even know if that's a word, or egocentric. That's the word that I was looking for. And Paul McCartney is so like lighthearted. And I was like, how are these two individuals going to like make something or produce something? And it was just interesting because I remember that like, there's a song called All Day, and it starts off with like this heavy vocal, like, but that actually was Paul McCartney's like guitar riff. And it was interesting because Kanye at the time in the studio session with Paul was just telling Paul to just play random chords and random riffs. And Paul was like, okay, I don't know what this guy's gonna do with this. A month later, Kanye sends him a file and it's the vocoder, but like singing the riff out in his yeah, it was just interesting because it was so much different than what Paul imagined, but Paul just let Kanye be himself. So that's what we ended up getting.
I love
That's
that
awesome.
song as well. Absolutely.
I'm dying to hear, Pete. I'm dying to hear what your selection is, because you have such a wealth of musical taste, such a broad spectrum.
Well,
Hit
the
us.
first thing I want to say is I love that you've been tricked, Evenson, by the British accent thing. Like, don't get it twisted. Paul McCartney is no less egocentric than Kanye West. He just does it in his charming way, and it works. But you know, there's an inner Kanye in there. But okay, I think collaborations wise, I think an important thing for me is that they shouldn't have existed in a way, and like a bit like you said, and you kind of, it comes out of nowhere. And for me, if I think about the one that did that most and crossed so many boundaries and also had a lot of importance kind of socially at the time, would be Aerosmith and Run DMC. Walk This Way. Because at the time, it was such a moment where you liked that, which meant you couldn't like that. And so for that song to come along and for it to be so inclusive, where everyone went, oh, I get to say I like rock too, or rap too, was just amazing cultural moment that, you know, thank God now it's not even a question. Like, genre is so fluid now, but at the time I don't think it was. So very forward thinking. It's still super hooky. It's fun. Love it.
That's amazing. And it's one of the best in history. But, you know, in talking about chemistry and collaboration as we are on this edition of Let's Talk Music, something came to mind as we gathered just a few minutes ago. You're all solo artists. So why aren't you not in bands? Because a big part of collaboration is the band experience, right? And chemistry comes from a group of people who come together. Now, my first thought is, oh, these are people who like to kind of collaborate with a variety of people. But before we get to that, why are you solo artists, Emily?
I think that for me, I probably never met like the right people to identify with. I don't know, or maybe I like a little selfishly to be able to say what I want to say. I don't know. I've never even given it a thought to like join a band, you know? I think
it's just your natural idea to kind of explore your own vision.
I think so. And I think like maybe if I met somebody who I was like, oh my gosh, like I want to do everything with this person creatively, then maybe we would like join a band or something. But I don't know.
It's an interesting thought, right?
Solo. It is.
because you know, like I said, I imagine that part of the allure of being a solo artist is having the freedom to move about. But I'm not sure. What's the case with you?
I will say that most of the time I'm trying to manage my own ego. And I do think that if I were to like be in a band, I would have to reduce the amount of egos that I would have to manage or be around. So making music or making anything creative takes a lot of compromise. And so I have to do a lot of compromise, even just being a solo act. And I don't know, I can't imagine being in a band. And it's interesting because most bands end up breaking up because more often than not, people end up wanting to go about their own ways and wanting to express their own creative vision. I guess I'm just like, I just have too much creative excitement within me that I don't know. It took a while for me to find a producer that I work with right now. And like, I couldn't imagine how long it would take for me to find a band that I would really feel comfortable being in expressing my ideas, because a lot of my ideas are sort of like left field.
So Pete, you know, Until the Ribbon Breaks is a band concept, but it's evolved into a ship that you sail with passengers by your invitation.
Mhm.
When did you realize that that was really the way you wanted to proceed?
Until the Ribbon Break specifically has been a funny one in that collaborative band sense. I was in bands forever, different bands growing up, everything from I played trumpet in a ska punk band to all the things, all these terrible bands, and then was a solo artist, and then until the Ribbon Breaks was the first project I've done, which was born solely out of the identity of the music rather than the was it a band, was it a solo thing. So it moves with whatever the sound is at the time. For a while, it had more of a, on the first record, there was more of a desire for it to be a band. So for all intents and purposes, there was 3 of us and we toured it. And now as I'm making the third record, it feels more like a features project. So it moves. But in terms of why, I think it's, yeah, like the other guys said, it's hard to open it up once you find a distinct, what you feel is your distinctive voice. It's hard then to go, and now, it's such a personal thing that yeah.
But at the same time, Emily, when you are making a record, you are taking your ideas and you're fleshing them out, and generally you need to have players and sometimes co-writers, producers, people who will then kind of like participate in the realization of your vision. So, and to me, I always think about, I can't do it, so I idealize the idea of being a songwriter. And so I think then, okay, that's such an intimate, personal thing. So how do you then, when you do reach the point of collaboration, how do you then decide who you're going to let into that world, and how are you going to like parse out the most sensitive parts of your world?
I think I mean, I often seek out people and meet them first, like, of course, like try to see if there's any chemistry or anything like that in the beginning. And then the people that I keep going back to are the ones that I feel like don't pass judgment, or that I just feel really safe with. Because, actually just thinking about it, I feel like I would get lost in a band situation because I'm kind of like timid. I'm a people pleaser. So even when collaborating, I often am like, do you like that? Do you think that's okay? And so I have to find balance in finding people that support me in a way that are like, what would you say? What would you do? And I have to be like comfortable with them for sure,
So tell me, you said chemistry, which is obviously part of what we're digging into here.
Yeah.
What does chemistry look or feel like to you?
It feels comfortable, and it feels like, I don't know, it's more of like a feeling than anything I can probably describe like correctly. But when you get in a room and you start talking, I guess it's chemistry maybe is like-mindedness as well. Does that make sense? Like you're on the same wavelength when you're having an initial conversation or talking about your day. You can be like, yes, oh my gosh, me too, I feel that way. That's usually where I feel like it starts. And it's just like, I don't know, like this is how I feel like instead of words, I can just be like this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. It does indeed. So Evenson, when I listen to your music, I feel like I'm disappearing into a corner of your brain, a part of your psyche, right? Your each of your songs has this kind of like this atmosphere that you build. It's like stepping into an alternate universe. It's really phenomenal. And so how do you let someone into that? How do you do that? How do you explain that to someone?
I'm very it's a very interesting question. I'm a very intuitive and emotionally based musician. Meditation is a big part of my life, and feeling is a big part of everything I do, and talking to myself and judging my inner dialogue. But I don't have that, I'll be honest, I don't have that much experience in regards to the collaborative music environment. Like the first producer I ever reached out to happens to be the one that I still work with today. But I guess the approach that I took when I wanted to work with him was, I heard a song that he wrote with this girl by the name of Sophie Cates, and it was one of the saddest things I have ever heard in my entire life. And I was like, okay, I would like to express this emotion that I'm feeling right now. I think he might be able to help me express this emotion that I'm feeling right now. It just so happens that we're extremely like-minded individuals. And so I guess it's easier for me to express myself in a music environment if the person's willing to listen to my radical ideas. And for me, on my end, I'll listen to all of their radical ideas as well. I like to get the most out of everyone that I work with. And in order to do that, you must be willing to hear and see what they're capable of. I think that was.
No, I mean, but so to go one step further though, when did you know that your current producer, your first producer, was going to be long-term? Because you've made a lot of records with him.
Honestly, after the first session,
Yeah?
after the first session, I was like, it was such a unique experience, mainly because he could even speak to it himself. I was just I was just saying anything that came to my brain. Like, oh, like, just put this over here, move that over there. Can you do that with that, do that with that? What if we just created a weird atmospheric world in this 20-second section? He's like, what? And I'm like, just trust me, this is gonna work. But more often than not, he's like, okay, I'm gonna listen to you. I think it's gonna work. And then more often than not, it does. And if it doesn't, we're honest enough with the work and and whatever we're making, that we speak to what the art that we're making, and we're willing to dial back if it's necessary. So I knew after the first one because I could just feel that there was just a lot of energy in the room. Yeah.
So, Pete, I can't believe I've never asked you this, but so here we go. You're such a big personality, and you're a strong-willed man, and you're attracted to big personalities and strong-willed artists.
Yeah.
So I know who wins in the tug of war. You do. But how do you get to a point of a comfortable playing field when you're not attracted to a pushover, you're not attracted to a puppet, but you have a vision and you want to follow that vision through? That's a big metric to sort out. How do you do that?
Listening to what Evenson was saying, for me, it comes down, what I actually look for in the studio if I'm collaborating with someone is maybe this is the wrong word, but actually the discomfort in our differences is I'm actually looking for initially a moment of musical clash. Energy has to be right, like Emily said, there has to be just a human chemistry, like you said, there are no words for it. There has to be that thing where you even want to be in the room. But then once you're in the room, for me, the size of the ego / the ideas / the energy and the tenacity, and I love all that fight, because if you can stay the course, and if both people have the strength to fight for their ideas, but are willing and humble enough to know that it's a collaboration, then eventually the idea will tell you both, or however many people are, eventually the idea will go, all right, shut up now, we got it, let's work on it. So I actually will source out that discomfort. I love the electricity of it. I love the conflict, because out of that conflict, I think, comes something new. So to me, that, like, being safe in the studio is really important, as long as you feel safe to be uncomfortable, if that makes sense.
So it makes complete sense. And one of what all of you just said leads me to my next question is, how do you find that safety? How do you find that trust? Because to me, that is, I loathe the moment when I have to share a new idea with people, because I'm terrified of being laughed at. Terrified. And so to do what all of you do, and then explain it to a producer, to a musician, to a collaborator, just feels like a fate worse than death. So how do you find that trust? Where from within, or maybe what I should be asking is, where do you find the confidence to then find the trust? Because you have to have a degree of confidence and ego in order to then say, okay, I'm seeking you out, I'm sussing you out, and I found the point by which I can trust you. So how do you do that, Emily?
Well, I think first, like as you were saying it, I was thinking it, like, you do have to find the confidence first, because how are you going to learn to trust without putting yourself out there? You know, I feel like, at least for me, like, if we're talking about producers, especially, I think it's kind of trial and error, you know, but you have to be confident in what you think you want, because you might go in there and they could say no, they could change it. And then you go, okay, well, this is not the person. So it's kind of tricky, because you want to be able to trust, but you have to also be willing to get rejected and put yourself out there, I think, is a big part of it.
But I want to go
Wow.
one step further with you,
Absolutely.
because you are in Nashville, which
Right.
is a world unto itself for music and for musicians. And you're a woman, and women in Nashville have not always been treated with the greatest of respect.
Right.
So how do you move through that as a woman who has an idea of who she is, who knows who she is? I've listened to your music. I know what your vision is. It's very clear. But so how do you then navigate that, especially as a self-confessed people pleaser?
Well, I think it took a lot of being rejected and being told no and being told, who's going to say that? You know, I feel like you almost get, or at least my experience was, I don't want this to sound harsh, but I almost got like beaten down to the point where I had to go, okay, well, now what do I have? And that's when I figured who I was. And that's when I found the confidence to be like, well, who cares if this person doesn't like me, or this person's going to say no? Because eventually you get so broken down that you're like, well, why am I even making music? And that's because I love it and it lives in my soul, you know? So basically I just work with my friends or people who become my friends, because I know that they're, you know, that's automatically a safe place, you know?
That's so interesting, because I actually find showing friends my personal stuff really hard.
Really?
Because if someone I don't have a personal investment in laughs, I just go, what do you
Next.
know? I never have to see you again.
Right.
But yeah, but you know, like if my partner goes, well, that's not good, then it's gonna burn my soul. So
Right.
I admire you. I admire you greatly. But Evenson, so to take what we're talking about, right? The sensitivity of your music, the you know, the fragility of the lyrics coupled with the explorations of sound and dynamic and all these different things. How do you find the, I mean, you know, you built this thing with your producer, but there still is a degree of unlocking the door and letting it come out. So 30 seconds before you unlock the door, what happens?
I think it comes down to, for me, it comes down to, like, I always go back to that intuition. Like, I know when I've made a killer demo, and but in order to do that, I have to make 1,000 terrible ones. But I always know, I always know when that one killer one is killer. And I know that if that person doesn't believe in it, somebody else is going to believe in it. But in order for me to establish that trust, they must first prove worth to me. That's just me naturally as a human being. And so after that first session, or even after we made the first song, and that was my first successful, or any bit of success that I've ever experienced with music. And I was like, okay, this person knows how to take something very sensitive that I have and knows how to help me nurture it and create something very solid that I could be proud of. Because the first song that I made, The More You Want to Break Up, was coming off of a very, heartbroken situation that I was experiencing in my life. And he was able to take a very vulnerable piece of music that I wrote and was able to turn it into magic with me. And from then on out, I knew that I can go to him and take anything, whether it's like reform based music, whether it's like depression, isolation, anxiety. I knew that that was someone I could talk to. He's like one of my best friends. I could talk to him about anything. And so it's about, proving your worth, whether or not you're worthy enough of me, sort of like stripping back my soul, stripping back my ego, just that way I can sort of be more confident in the studio and be more confident with approaching you with any piece of work that I show.
So, Pete, when did you learn to trust your intuition about music and who you let into your musical world? When did you learn to trust your intuition?
I mean, firstly, both of those two answers were so amazing, and a lot, I think, and the word that keeps coming up is trust. And confidence. It's a funny balance, isn't it? Being confident enough that you can trust is a strange dilemma.
But it's the necessary equation, isn't it?
Well, yeah, music for me, I mean, my parents are both musicians, and music was the one part of this sentence isn't going to make sense, but I'm figuring it out myself, because this is what Larry does, by the way. You come away going like, oh God. In a great way, but yeah, music is the one thing I don't have any distance between my intuition and my instincts and music. I have full confidence that it's the one thing in my life that there's no gap between the thought and what I think is worth doing. But that's different than, that's not to say, still, most of it's terrible. But then there's this one part of it that's great. But I have the confidence that the terrible stuff will birth something good. Like, I don't judge my own, I wouldn't even consider them mistakes. And that's a thing that I've learned through making 100 things to get 10 great things, and realizing over years and years of doing it that each time I did one of those terrible things, I learned the smallest thing which I didn't know at the time, and then all of those small things add up to one great thing, which means it's all worth it. And going just to back on something you said, Emily, is that when I work with new artists, and it's always the same thing of like everything, you know, you don't want to be the kind of jaded music industry, like, well, okay, like, don't, you know, there's a lot that's going to get in the way before you get here, and you don't want to say that. But the one thing I do always kind of secretly wish for with new artists is some rejection and some failure, which I wouldn't even consider failure, because it hardens you, and fucking hell, it's tough out there, you know. And it hardens you to eventually to be able to turn up at studios and go, like you said, if you don't like it, I still do. So maybe this is just the wrong collaboration. It's not that I'm wrong or that you're wrong. It's just that these two things don't have to exist together.
Mhm.
But you have the confidence to say, this didn't work out, but like, thanks, you know?
So I want to kind of explore something else, a different kind of chemistry that each of you have to deal with. And that is the chemistry that you develop with your audience. Because in order to do what you do, you have to have an audience of people who care, or at least who are willing to listen a little bit. And it especially happens when you go out and you play, right? That's how you know often what's working, what's not working. And, you know, I don't think enough artists talk about the ultimate of collaboration that they have to experience, which is with the people whom they're playing to, whom they hope to build a relationship with, a relationship of trust, right? A relationship of exposure of your honesty that they will then receive, relate to, hold close to their heart, and then invest in you beyond 3.5 minutes, right? They'll invest in you for your whole life, your whole career. That's really how fandom is built. So what have you experienced up to this point? How have you experienced that hardest part of the equation, which is finding the chemistry with other human beings who don't know anything about your day, who don't know anything about that room where you were in there and they said no. They don't know anything about anything other than the music, the performance, the visuals. How have you dealt with building that chemistry? Because there is something, right? You know it. You go to a show, the room explodes. It's this relationship, it's this love affair, it's this chemistry. Emily, how have you experienced that?
Well, I think when other people can find themselves in your lyrics or can see themselves in what you're doing, I think that's when the chemistry happens for them. And I don't know, you know, nowadays though, I feel like we've been talking about this lately about how do we connect to people? How do we find the people that want to listen? And it's way more than the music, I feel like, because I feel like they might find me and say, you know, maybe it's that like-mindedness a little bit. And they go, you know, I like what she believes in or whatever. And then they go listen to my music. So it's kind of weird because it's not even just a musical discovery anymore, which is very interesting to me. But for me personally, as a fan of music, the artist that I latch onto is when I can hear their lyrics and I just like, it almost feels like they took the words out of my mouth. You know what I mean? Or can put words to my feelings when I can't find them. That's how I find chemistry. That's the only way I can kind of think about it, you know, is to rate myself as a music fan, because that's what I am as well as an artist, as a fan, you know.
Yeah, love that.
Absolutely. So, but Evenson, excuse me, when you are working on an idea, building and finding what you're willing to share of yourself and what you're keeping safe just for yourself. And in doing that, how much are you thinking about the connection that someone you've never met could have with what you're sharing?
I really loved Emily's answer, by the way.
Yeah.
I think I honestly, I don't, if I'll be honest, because if I do, that could take away from the creative process for me personally. Because what I found that has I sort of worked as of recent, or even with the last several releases I've done in the last year, is that people have responded to my raw vulnerability. And if I think about the words that I'm going to say, then I'm going to hold back from what I really want to say inside. Because then I'm thinking from I'm thinking of myself through the perception of somebody else. And so for me personally, I try my hardest, my best to not think about that. Because in order for me to get those things that I'm not willing to say and that other people aren't willing to say, because then I have to, put my blinders on. I think that, I think that people have responded to that, the vulnerability, and like I have my sounds are pretty diversified. So, but I like to keep things under the same umbrella of expressing myself in a very raw form. And in order to do that, I must sort of, uncover everything.
So Pete, where do you land on this spectrum? Because we've heard kind of like really almost opposite ends of it right now, in that, how conscious are you of your relatability, especially right now, as you're in, you're in a deep creative mode?
I'm just trying to figure out, though I love how different those two answers are, and they're both so kind of,
I do too.
They're both so valid in the sense that I really understand both, in that if I think of artists that I love for different reasons, some have that kind of allure of, I can't quite get in, but it keeps me wanting to, and some have that really, I feel like I have a relationship with that person, and that's why I love it. And I think both are so valid. I don't know to be honest, I think I used to be a lot more conscious of it, because I used to care a lot more about perception and people's ideas of what I did. And the more I have done work in that regard, and I mean away from music, like on a personal level, I feel like it's not so important to me. I think, again, it comes down to trust. I now trust that if I am right with myself and I've said the thing that I want to say without considering why, or who might like it or who might not, then whatever happens after that is none of my business. I think that's where I like to land, because that keeps me free creatively.
Yeah.
But that's not to say I don't hope it lands with people. So it's a great question, because it's a very complicated relationship. Yeah.
It is, and even as a listener, it's complicated, because sometimes I like artists who feel like they're sitting on my shoulder and whispering an idea to me, and sometimes I like just full immersion into a world different than my own. I just need something to hold on to, though. So let's have as we get closer to the end of this conversation, let's have a little joyful fantasizing, shall we?
Why not?
Why not, right? Why not? We've talked about some pretty serious stuff. Let's have a giggle now. Let's talk about the dream collaborator and why. And I'm not asking you for, the elements of a great collaborator, but like, who is out there who you think would bring something that you would love to have come out of your music, right? So it's not like, oh, I want to meet Linda Ronstadt or Kanye or no. Who would enhance your sound, and who do you feel has a like-minded vision that you would love to just kind of huddle and share ideas and collaborate with? I'll give you all a second to think about that. But I have a feeling that Pete has an idea because he has that look in his eye.
Oh, I'm gonna say the person that I'm actively trying to make that happen with, and hell or high water, I'm somehow it's gonna happen, is that, you know, I'm currently making this record called Visitor, and it's not a concept record by any means, other than the title is about the idea that essentially our species have been pretty bad visitors on this planet so far. And I've been listening to, on each record, I've been lucky enough to have someone who I love speaking on it, whether it's like as a way to link all the tracks, or like I had an author I love, Jonathan Ames, on the last record, and then this Mark Maron on a previous record. And this record, I can't stop hearing David Attenborough's voice.
Oh my goodness.
On the end of this song I've got called Nature Mother, and I just can't let it go. So I've been sampling him, and I'm doing whatever I can to try and to put that into the universe. So here's another opportunity to do that. Sir David, please. There you go.
What are you doing next Sunday, Sir David? Emily?
Ooh, this is a tough question. But if I think, like I was saying, as being a fan, to where when I listen to music, I feel like, ooh, that's hitting like a spot in my body that I just like wants to come out. Or like my soul or whatever. But Lucas Nelson, I think, would be fun for me, because I feel like he's like a hippie, and he just seems like he has a really big heart. But I would love to explore that more like rootsy, gritty version of myself that I don't think has been allowed to come out yet. You know, like we're so focused on commercial country, and I would just love to just like see what happened. And his writing is so like fun and mystical to me. I don't know. It's pretty awesome.
He'd bring out wonderful things in you, Emily. He really would. Evenson?
I'm like torn between Phoebe Bridgers and Dijon. I started making, honestly, folk music was what really got me into music, which is really like random and left field. I'm just captivated by her songwriting. I'm probably gonna release a folk record one day. But Dijon, mostly, I've been really captivated by his recent album. It's called, I don't want to mess up the name. I'm not going to say the name, but it's an incredible album. He has a film, a 29-minute film on YouTube. And so the album is weird because it's like recorded in a sort of live setting, but his vocals are almost like uncompressed and untuned throughout the entire thing. But there's just like raw and abrasive and primal aspect to it, like him like begging for his ex to come back, like belting out like every bit of imperfection in his voice. And I'm like listening to it, and it literally makes me want to shake. And I'm just like, oh my God, this is human. And like, I'm still learning how to sing. I'll never consider myself a great singer or even good. That's how I keep myself improving, I guess. But he would get that like that sort of like key like unlocked out of myself, because I've been making music, but looking back, it's kind of funny because like I feel like every year I take something and I add something new to myself. And I'm listening to his record and I'm like, I want to learn how to be able to express everything that I'm feeling, everything. Like if I want to make you feel like I'm crying while I'm singing into the microphone right now. And hopefully the listener, if they're listening to it, can almost like, I don't know, quiver a bit. But I love Dijon's new record and I would love to work with him. Oh my gosh.
Well, what I highly recommend you do, Evenson, is once we all log off from this conversation, you get that title, you log onto VERO, and you post a recommendation for everyone who's watching to find, because that's what this is all about. We have these conversations on Let's Talk Music to encourage you to not just learn more about these three remarkable people, but also to see that this is what we do each and every day on VERO. So we hope you'll join us there. And I have to say, when I sit here in my little office in Wales, I try to think about what combinations of people would make sense for what different topics I want to talk with you all about. I never know what the chemistry is going to be, and I was so moved by the humility of each of you, and the fact that none of you know that you're as good as you are, which is fascinating to me. And you're remarkable, gifted people. And thank you for letting us learn more about your process, because collaboration, chemistry, part of it is what we just did, which is let people in. So thank you all very much. I'm Larry Flick. We'll see you next time.
You know what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about.